Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us as part of this wonderful Iowa Ideas um, conference where we are going to be learning lots of different topics and how we can make Iowa the great state that we all know that it is, right? So today you are in for a treat. So my name is Angela Weekly. I work at Viridian Credit Union. My pronouns are she and her. Um, and today I have the pleasure of facilitating a conversation around controversial topics in education. And by that, we have decided that we are going to use a topic that is because that could be wide range of things, right? So we've decided that we are going to narrow it into how do we teach and make sure that we're teaching the truth, right? So that is what we are going to do, and how do we bring that in an equitable way. We couldn't have this conference for free for everybody without our wonderful sponsors. Thank you all for coming. Make sure that you check out other sessions throughout the day. The inclusion tab is throughout every part of the conference today. And with that said, Stephen, I'll turn it over to you to let us see this fabulous video that we have for our sponsors.
Hi friends, Angelica Veneta, co-chair of Inclusive ICR. We are a coalition of over 220 employers in Eastern Iowa, all working together to grow the diversity and inclusion of our workforce, to create a space where employees feel a sense of belonging, included, and valued. Inclusive ICR is a proud sponsor of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion track of the Iowa Ideas Conference. As you participate today, be sure to connect with other Inclusive ICR champions, as we'd love to share information with you about our upcoming coalition meetings, projects, and how our work is impacting positive social change in our region. Be sure to check out our website at inclusivicr.org for upcoming events and our e-newsletter. Thank you, and have a great conference.
So with that said, I am going to kick it off to our panelists to introduce themselves. And as they're introducing themselves, I'm also going to ask them to tell us what draws them to equity in education. And we are going to start with Dr. White.
Well, I thank you, Angela. My name is Dr. Ruth White. I am an educator by training, an activist by necessity. I am a person who has come to know the importance of equity in education because I have lived the opposite, the antithesis. I am the child of two people, a professional and a stay-at-home mom, and we were the first Black people ever, underline ever, to live in the town that we moved to when I was 6 years old, Rantoul, Illinois. So my upbringing was as the only one. Luckily, I had a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad, and so we cocooned ourselves. So fast forward, I kept looking for myself in the things that were offered as education and not seeing myself. And I was a good student, so I was reading a lot and doing all my homework like I should have, and never seeing myself. Kept looking. Middle school, high school, college, graduate school, finally found someone who could teach me about what I knew was there, but was never offered at the University of Iowa. Wonder of wonders. Darwin Turner was the person who led me to my literary and cultural awakening. So all through this, I was teaching. I was an English teacher at Washington High School in Cedar Rapids, and found myself in the same kind of situation as a professional that I had grown up in as a kid, a place where the students of color were in the vast minority and they were not being offered information that represented them. So because of those two kinds of parallel tracks, I absolutely have no choice but to be involved in and continue to be involved in equity issues in education. Of course, I could go on and on, but we only have an hour, so I'll pass it on to the next person.
Miss Laura, we'll let you go next. But Stephen has to unmute you first. So we'll let Dr. Duncan go, and then we'll go to you.
Thanks, Angela. Good morning. I'm Annette Duncan. I'm currently a literacy coach in Waterloo. I primarily serve kindergarten through fifth grade. Some of my past roles have been a diversity instructor for Viterbo University and for Upper Iowa University. What really led me to that cultural awakening that Dr. White just referred to was, for 6 years, I had a second grade class primarily, and then a third grade class primarily of African-American males. And it was an initiative through Governor Vilsack. And our goal was to keep Black males out of special education, off of medication. And through that awakening, it led me to facilitate numerous book studies around cultural responsive teaching, critical race theory. I've been in the field of education in Waterloo for 32 years. So for me, what drew me to equity was it comes down to one question, and that's, for whom is the path most clear? We know that we have roadmaps for creating that true equity. We currently have pockets of excellent work across the district, across the state. We need to work to make those pockets of excellence trends of success. There is a sense of urgency in this work because it's life-changing for all of our students. So for me, what's drawn me to equity is that commitment to clearing that path. We have significant instructional gaps, and I purposely don't call them achievement gaps because it's instructional gaps that we need to address so that we can increase that core access for all. We also need to address the overrepresentation of Black males in special ed, provide those culturally responsive teaching strategies, implicit bias trainings. We also have inconsistent instructional strategies currently in some pockets. I'm really proud of our current TLC model, the Teacher Leader Compensation Program across Iowa, but particularly in Waterloo, we're really proud of it because we are working to build capacity of teachers through an equity lens to improve those instructional strategies and to close those instructional gaps that we have. We are working on analyzing data across all groups of students, recognizing trends that we may see, and then developing strategic plans to close those gaps and then turn those trends into pockets of trends of success. So again, what's drawn me to this is just that hard data on what our current reality is, the sense of urgency, and I'm really proud of Waterloo's commitment to this work.
Hi, do
Miss
you want me to
Laura.
jump in? All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Gray, and I'm the Director of Diversity and Cultural Responsiveness in Iowa City Community School District. And prior to that, I was born and raised in Chicago and did a teaching stint at Curie High School on the south side of Chicago. I taught English language arts for 10 years, and then I was an administrator for 3 before I moved to Iowa and was a building principal for 3 years at Northwest Junior High in Coralville. And what brought me to this particular work was kind of like what was said prior, just like circumstances. Like I didn't necessarily, you know what, I remember my first day as a principal in Iowa City Community School District, and a parent came up to me and was like, "Oh, you're here for the civil rights fight." And I'm like, "What do you no, I'm here to rest." Like I'm here to like relax. Like the pace is so different from Chicago, and I just welcomed that. In my mind, I'm thinking, what a peaceful place to teach and have a administrative career, and just really twinkle-eyed about the entire experience. And then very quickly I was like, oh. And so I don't have a choice. Like I really, like I like to be behind the scenes with some things, but it was definitely telling for me in my post-secondary career that I wasn't prepared for college. And I reflected back on just some of my educators and how how I was never in honors or AP, so like I was a regular track student, and just the attention that I got or did not get, and then feeling ill prepared in post secondary education. And that driving me to go into education in the first place. And then as an administrator, wanting to support teachers in like, well, really helping to coach them up or coach them out so that students wouldn't have to feel the way in which I felt, or go through some of the things I went through. And what I learned is, in Iowa, I think really, really great intentions, but especially having administrators of color lead is very foreign and uncomfortable. And so, in my experience, I found that there was a question of fit for me and other administrators of color, um, that have gone through the system. And so I've made it my mission to work with upper administration, with the C-suite, around how to manage those dynamics of difference, how to best support administrators, staff of color, students of color, so on and so forth. So some of the things we're doing is with restorative justice, restorative practices, but also culturally responsive teaching, like making sure that everyone has the language around cultural proficiency and the accountability piece so that we're calling each other in when inappropriate things come across. So that's kind of what led me there.
Thank you, ladies. I think that is all exciting. Like to hear your stories and why you're called to this. I think that will really, really help as we dive into this conversation around controversy in education. I just want to remind those of you who are listening to us, if you want to engage, the best way to engage is to put in the app questions, and then someone is monitoring those and we'll be sharing those with us, and we'll make sure that the panelists do get those questions, because we really want to make sure that this session is for you. We came with an agenda in the event that you didn't have questions, but again, we want to make sure that this is fruitful for those of you that are attending this session. So with that said, the title of this session is Controversy in Education. And what brought us to that conversation, is the recent legislature around the 1619 project. Can you ladies just tell us, what are your thoughts around that 1619 project, and what other projects have you seen stem, or ways or opportunities to provide some of that information?
Do you want us to take the same order that we took before?
I want you to just chat like we did
Jump
yesterday,
in.
like the other day. Just chat. Just chat.
Okay. All right. Well, I can just say that whenever I'm in a room like this one, I am aware of the experiences that I've had, and I can look over my shoulder and see what kinds of omissions have led me to where I am today. What we have talked about in our prep session is the truth, is making sure that people are aware of what is true about our history as a country. And it is extremely disconcerting to me that there is so much, I'll just say, falderall, hue and cry around the 1619 project, when what it does is tell the truth. And period. The people who are feeling some kind of way, as they say, about this work, this series, I believe do not know the truth. I believe have not read the truth. I believe have not been taught the truth, which brings us full circle to why we are here talking about the truth now. Had we made it our our business, had we made it a requisite to know what the truth is, to know what the reality of our history is, then we could be spending time adjusting to that instead of pushing back against it. The truth will out. And the fact that we have this work, this information, should make us, well, I won't say happy, because what we discover is not pretty, but we have to understand what the reality of the situation is in order to move past it. And everyone who has had a role in bringing us to this point, I think of John Lewis, for example, talking about getting in good trouble, has realized that, has either lived the history or has read and learned the history. As I said in my introduction, I learned the history by default. I kept saying, where in the heck am I in this education that I am receiving? And I was nowhere. Had I not had a father who was college educated and had books in the house as a result of that, I would have been just totally bereft. And I will say to you that feeling of just being in a void as a student led me directly to the development of the Academy for Scholastic and Personal Success, which I will continually advertise, but which exists because Black, brown, and biracial students do not see themselves even to this day. When I listened to Laura talk about the importance of having Black people lead, that is alien in this demographic. It is not the norm. And so when we know where we have been, we can more efficiently move forward. I can go on, but I am all conscious of the fact that I'm not the only person on the screen. I just want to read something that I found when I was looking for something else, which is the way research often goes, about the 1619 project. It says, it's a review from this website. It says, this riveting conversation, and by the way, it was in a list of the best books of 2021, the best. This riveting conversation among journalists, historians, poets, novelists, essayists, and photographers, notice it did not include politicians, lends a technicolor depth to our American story, opening a kaleidoscopic historical vista that leaves us to ponder voices and stories only now heard. I will be the teacher and say, realize those words, only now heard. Doesn't mean that they haven't always been there. It just means we're just now hearing them. An exhilarating read, the 1619 Project responds to W.E.B. Du Bois' once asked question, nations stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all this so far as the truth is ascertainable? Well, I would posit that the truth has always been ascertainable, but now here it is right in front of us. And should we not just put on our big girl pants and our big boy pants and confront it and use this information to move us forward? I see the reluctance, I see the fear as a result of our political environment, but even so, I think, my goodness, what are people afraid of that they are so willing to subvert this information? Then I think, well, history repeats itself, and people say, if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. That's what's happening. If you can go back far enough, you'll see that this kind of thing, not this exact thing, this kind of subversion has happened before. I hope that we are willing and smart enough to keep it from happening again.
And you're so right, Dr. White, that teaching the truth isn't about politicizing education. It comes down to teaching students to think critically about issues that they do
Exactly.
encounter, that they will encounter, as they become contributing citizens to this global society, right? I do believe this project has illuminated another narrative of the formative years of our country, including our understandings around liberty, equality, the contributions that Black Americans have made to our country, as well as shining that light on that systemic racism that still affects all aspects of our nation, including our healthcare access, economic disparities, environmental racism, and of course, racial discrimination. The project for me gave me a fresh understanding of what Black Americans have had to endure, the courage that they have had to have. And ironically, the critics that you referred to that are calling her historical narrative unbalanced and one-sided, it started as an historical narrative to add to the others that we've always had in America. And now it's become such an intense debate. For me, as a white woman growing up in a small town, Iowa, I feel cheated of a lot of the truth. My textbooks didn't teach me that balanced historical narrative. As an adult, once I started teaching students that didn't look like me, I had to reach out and learn the truth. I had to teach myself that truth and reach out to cultural informants to learn that truth. That path that I discussed earlier, it can't be clear for all students if only one side of our history is narrated, and if it's not even valued enough to be part of our students' curriculum. I'm really proud that Hannah Nicole Jones has opened her first Freedom School here in Waterloo. It's got about 30 students in it right now. It opened this fall. It's about teaching students literacy through Black history. They're not teaching critical race theory. The program has nothing to do with that, but yet it's gotten to be a hot debate issue. But it's about teaching students that their social capital that they bring to the table is valued and important. And it's part of all of our narratives, and it shouldn't be unbalanced.
I think the word fear that Dr. White brought up is really what is resonating with me when it comes to the 1619 project. And I don't know if you've ever seen images of an anger iceberg. That's a graphic that we use to show people. You might see anger on top, but just as far down underneath the water is all these real feelings for people, like wanting to connect, or hurt feelings, or whatever. It's the same way for fear. And so, what's driving the fear is really interesting to me, because it is really this want to protect, I think, what is privilege, and wanting to maintain comfort. And I don't know, but what I really want to impress upon people is that, if you don't know what it is yourself, how can you be afraid of it? And how are we modeling for students this curiosity that's so necessary in order for them to compete in a global society? And so the majority of my audiences are predominantly white. So I have to move through those spaces very, very strategically as a Black woman, right? Like, where, I don't know, someone else doing something similar might be able to move differently. I know my audience, I know, people, I know connectedness and what needs to happen so that they can hear deeper. And so one of the things, and it's unfortunate that you have to sometimes then go a carrot about why people should care about this, but here it is. Even our white students, right? In order for them to be able to really compete in a global society, you will want them to have a holistic picture of what's going on, of what's happened. You will want them to be able to manage dynamics of difference. This idea of, by engaging in hard history and or diversity, or talks about race, being racist or being divisive, is something that we really have to like just give a totally new narrative to. Those things will help us be able to be in community in a way that's so rich. And most people want to be in community, they just don't know how. And so I think it starts with parents informing themselves or community members about what it is. Um, I know it's there, and I know that it's there to intimidate schools from teaching hard history, but Senate House File 802 and 744, they don't actually say that you cannot teach hard history. They're very particular about a couple things you cannot say, but you can still teach the truth. And that's what educators are meant to do. That's what we signed up for. That's what all of our children need. The white students need it. If they have a portion of history, how can they compete globally? They cannot. They won't be able to unless you're prepping them to stay in a backyard somewhere and not like be able to grow. That thought of not exposing them to certain things, you're going to stifle your child. You're going to stifle children. And most students, when they feel like you're trying to keep something from them deliberately, will go explore after that thing even more. And so it's this piece around like these things happen. What can we do now? Not necessarily. I'm not one to want to assign blame and have people feeling guilty or having white people feeling defeated or broken down. I need you whole because I need you to understand that we all have privilege. We all have different amounts of it. But what are you doing with yours? I don't need you to feel guilty, or I don't need you to come front facing with all this false humility. I need you to know who you are, know what you have, know how to use your voice, understand what happened, be curious, remain open to learn, and let's do this together. Let's change some things.
Yeah, I truly, I'm sorry, should I not say anything?
Go ahead.
This is really piggyback city, because what Laura said about being able to compete in a global society called to my consciousness the fact that the world is brown. Most of the world is brown, Black, or of color. And so for us as Americans to give our students, our children, the idea that whiteness is the only way to go, whiteness is rightness, is a total disservice, which, as you alluded to, Laura, and you too, Annette, young people will be curious about naturally. What we don't do as educators, and I'm not in that classroom anymore, but what I think I'm seeing is the absence of the focus on thought, on thinking, on intellectual curiosity, on those things that if you teach, those have nothing to do with race. If you teach a child how to think, then many of these issues will resolve themselves because the students will bring up the questions, as you suggested, Laura. The students are curious. I can't tell you how many young people I have taught in advanced placement, English, literature, and humanities, totally, almost always a class of white students. I would have to go around and find Black students and say, you're going to be in my class. You can do this, sit down. But when I introduced something that was not on the syllabus, which I was wont to do in my maverick years, they were curious. Where's this been? They said to me, or where can I learn more? Or is this the only book she has written? Or, so there is that curiosity that if we don't, as I said before, subvert it, will make its way to the top. So that when I started the academy, it was for Black kids, Black, brown, and biracial students, because they had been left out of the narrative, even as, when I was in the classroom. And it's still going on. I thought, 10 years, I'll be able to get these kids, ready for the world. Well, here we are 30 years later, and it's still a necessity, and arguably even more of a necessity now than it was when I started it. So again, I will say, shut up, Ruth. Let's go on to the next question.
Well, no, that's such a good point, though. I can't tell you how many educators I've had call me from around the state and say, should I take your class because I don't have any Black students in my class. And I say, that's exactly why you need to,
Exactly.
because it comes back to that, what you said about being curious.
Mhm.
We have to know what we are facing and how to have that, like you said, the critical thinking and have dialogue around those issues and make it natural and authentic, not just a unit that you put in, but authentically infused throughout all of our curriculum.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think then you naturally started talking about what our next question is, and that is like, why is culturally specific? I apologize if my internet is acting up. Waterloo Schools doesn't have schools today, and I have told my granddaughter to get off the internet, but she won't listen. So I apologize to all of you who are working from home, but why is culturally specific curriculum important for all students? You've addressed that. One of the things that I would also like you to address on top of that is when we are teaching these truths, we often teach the struggle parts of the things, or we think about the struggle, but where do we talk about the hidden parts? How do we dig into that? And how do we also talk about the joyful things that have happened, the great things that have aspired out of these culturally specific or these BIPOC communities?
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's the idea of teaching struggle is it's absolutely necessary because that's what happened. But what I found myself asking myself when I was my own student, and what I have had students ask me is, how can you be happy if all of this stuff happened to you back in the day? How can you even smile? Isn't this history weighing on you? And I have had students who in the academy who have found that the dark times were so real for them as young people that it became a mental health issue. That's the truth of it. I mean, it is. If you study what is our American history, the things that you will discover are you have to be strong in order to take those in. However, at the same time, and this is the word that one of my favorite words to teach kids, dichotomy, two opposite things existing in the same space. You know, you've got your music, you've got your arts, you've got all of these people who create in the midst of this pain. And one could argue that it is the use of that pain in a creative way that produces the art. So here again, I'm going to make a shameless plug for the Academy for Scholastic and Personal Successes for Kids. But we discovered over the years that as Annette suggests, people call and say, you know, how can I find out more about this? And these are big people, adults. So we formulated a program for adults called Critical Conversations. I wanted to call it the Academy for White People, but my board said maybe you shouldn't. You always have to be discerning. But the critical conversations in that curriculum, we do focus on what has happened in the past. But we discovered that if we only do that, again, we are doing a disservice to our audience because they have to know about the music. They have to know about the art. They have to know about the literature. They have to know that slaves built most of, you know, our political structures. They have to know that people had these high levels of high skills in terms of artisanship that are kind of, you know, they're fading away now. But you have to know that kind of thing. And that's what makes the learning of any discipline, but this one in particular, whole. Because as you said, I think, Laura, it's not just one half of, you know, you can't just focus, or maybe it was you, Annette, I don't know, but you can't focus on one half and not not, and leave the other half out. So I think, Black
Yeah.
joy is real. So
Yeah. And I think about how that history, when we're talking about that history, how it leads to certain things. I know like one of my role models that for me was Mae Jameson, and my middle name is Mae. So that was always super exciting. I love science, but I didn't see myself in science. Even some of the like I researched and I knew about Garrett Morris, and I knew about of course George Washington Carver, because in Iowa we love George Washington Carver, right? Like, so I learned about those people, but they still didn't look like me. They looked more like my dad. And when I learned about Mae Jameson, and I thought, man, if I could teach other Black girls to like science as much as I do, and they could be a Mae Jameson, that would be amazing. And so that's when I say, how do we teach our kids about this history? And it doesn't even have to be a brown girl, but just in general, girls to know, like, they could aspire to be Mae Jameson. I think about the Black Panther, and one of the great, I think I read an article or I saw a video when they were like, the thing where he knew that he was no longer just the Black Panther for Black boys and girls, but that white kids aspired to be Black Panther, because that is all of our history, right? So just if you could speak to that part of the joy. So the struggle leads to these opportunities, right? So
I think a big part of that is also we don't need to start talking about his history from 1619 on. We can go back millions of years and look at, I taught a curriculum for my African-American gentleman in my class called Set Clay, Self-Esteem Through Curriculum Leads to Academic Excellence. And we went back millions of years to Imhotep and the engineers and the scientists and the mathematicians who built the pyramids, and how much joy and connection you can make to all cultures in their academic endeavors. And I think first and foremost, all educators need to be socially aware and also reflective of how their perspectives have shaped their thinking. For me, again, as that white woman, I need to be willing to have those candid conversations around race so that I can better understand all stakeholders, and making sure that I'm not just teaching about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, but I'm teaching about all Black Americans and contributions throughout history that have been made. For me, I've done this through finding cultural informants, having difficult conversations, trying to increase my own cultural dexterity, as you will. We all need to make better decisions for our students so that we can secure those better prospects, because they are our future leaders. We do have also that responsibility to not perpetuate those cycles of inequities, right? No, we're not responsible for being white, as 93% of our teaching force in Iowa, the elementary level, are, but we are responsible for how we respond to racism, how we develop our pedagogy, how we create a path for all students, and also just making sure that I'm constantly reflecting on instructional practices and looking at data, who's succeeding and where are the gaps in my instruction, to make sure that the path is clear again for everyone.
Iowa Code Multicultural Gender Fair holds educators accountable to showing diversity or multiculturalism in curriculum. Iowa teaching standards are designed to have an expectation of cultural proficiency and culturally responsive teaching for our educators. Zarita Hammond is one of my favorite authors. She talks about culturally responsive teaching and why students have to see windows and mirrors, why it's so important in order for them to be ready for rigor. I'm not talking about just Black and brown kids. I'm talking about all students, that they have to see windows, right, into other people's cultures, and mirrors, like a reflection of their culture throughout the curriculum, not on a special day, not on International Day, not, during Martin Luther King week, and within the curriculum, within the activities, within the worksheets, around the classroom environment, right? That it should be woven into that, and that only then can students start to feel welcome, safe, and included enough to trust students, to trust the educators to partner with them in their learning. And that's initially what all educators want, right? We want all the students to feel safe, we want them to feel welcome, we want them to feel included. And so look at curriculum right now. Is it doing that? And something that I really suggest is that people do reach out to Dr. White and get in that academy for critical conversations, because even as educators, so many of them, the curriculum will be there, but it'll be inaccurate. And if you don't know to question, if you don't know to stay curious, you'll continue to perpetuate an inaccurate representation of hard history. And so there's things that we can do even now. Yeah, you can't say that the US is systemically racist, and you can't say that Iowa is fundamentally racist. You can't say those things and keep your teaching license according to House File 802, right? But you can do so many other things. You can still break this down to students where they understand what happened, so that we can change that and move forward differently. So I suggest all educators, parents, get in that critical conversations course with Dr. White, and go through that curriculum so that you kind of have an understanding of some things, and then know how to question, know how to remain curious, because the textbooks are like what we're and these are textbooks right now that I'm finding huge inaccuracies in, huge misrepresentation of what actually took place. But if you don't know, you don't know, and you're going to continue to teach the way that we were taught.
So Laura, do you think there's a misunderstanding that people think we're trying to replace a certain type of curriculum? Because I like how you said it is infused throughout what we're already doing. We're not replacing math or science or reading. We're infusing different perspectives into math, highlighting some math scholars from different cultures, highlighting Black literature. So I think there's a fear out there that we're taking out everything and putting in something new that just focuses on one aspect, when we're really talking about taking our curriculum is Common Core State Standards. That's our curriculum. We're talking about the materials, the resources that we use to enhance those standards and to teach those standards. I think there's a fear that something's been taken away when actually we're trying to enhance, right?
Well, I would say start over. I would say not even some of these things you can't even fix. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you ever read We Want to Do More Than Survive by Dr. Bettina Love, but some of what's our educational system and the curriculum needs to be just I do think some of it needs to be like, yeah, no. We've pulled some curriculum at Iowa City Community School District, just said, you know what? I'll just call it out, TCI. Just too many egregious things that we found, not only about First Nations people, our Native American, but just really, really interesting narratives about the conquistadors and slavery and so on and so forth, that, we couldn't fix it. Do you understand? So some things I just want to say, it's not always about, sharing that it'll be more convenient or it's not going to be more work. Some of this, there's a price to equitable educational experience, and that might be time, energy, resources. It might be you're taking what you've done for years and saying, I only can keep a portion of this. I need to actually revise some of it. So I would say, that, I don't know, and that it might be for some of it that is like that. But for some large portion, we might need to be looking for a totally different narrative behind some of what's in the textbooks that we have.
Mhm.
What I'm hearing you all say is that educators, we need to remain curious. As educators, we need, and by educators, I don't mean just those that are in the classroom. I mean us as parents, as mentors, as whatever it is that whatever roles we take in our community, that we need to remain curious, and that culturally specific curriculum does not need to be, and then we're going to teach this culturally specific thing during Latino History Month with it, which ends tomorrow, right? Like, so I need to hurry up and get that in. but it should have just been throughout my curriculum, throughout the things that I do within what I do, not something set aside, but we normalize it. We do have, we have about 10 minutes left, less than 10 minutes, Stephen just told me. And I know that, Laura, you did start with a challenge to everybody, and I think we can sum it up. And Dr. Moore, we didn't ignore your question. I just didn't get to it. So if you want to end his question, Dr. Moore said, in the last 10 years, has Iowa sent more Black boys to college or prison? And what do you anticipate for the next 10 years? So if you want to say, what do you anticipate for the next 10 years? And what challenge do you want to give the audience? 3 minutes, I better say 2 minutes each. Dr. White, 2 minutes, because we have to wrap it up. I knew we would not get to all the questions.
Yeah, me too. Dr. Moore, hi, how are you? I don't have the statistics in front of me, but as long as I've been in Iowa, I've been confronted with the statistics around the number of Black males who have been incarcerated. And it's, we're maybe 3.5-4% of the population now, and 20 or 25% of the prison population, which is egregious and hurtful and unnecessary and wrong. So that's where we are. I believe somebody might have the more exact statistics. I think that my challenge would be to take what Laura said and realize that there are some things that we have done that are just not right. And if you want to start talking morality, we can do that. But let's just keep it in the framework of education. We have not educated our young people well. And so I would say, if Laura thinks there are some things that we just need to undo in order to move forward on a straighter path, that's what we need to do. And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge job. It's like unraveling the stump of bees, as my mother used to say, that we have created for ourselves. But should we just look at it and say it's too hard, or should we formulate a system that goes forth and attempts to right the wrongs that we have created for ourselves? The freedom schools, the academy, those are attempts to do that. But what I hear you saying, Laura, and I totally agree, having done some curriculum writing, is that we need to examine things with a clear eye and say, this needs to go. We can replace it with this. This can't stand. And yes, Black people should be at the focus of that, or, we should talk about the history of our people. But as you indicated, let's talk about Native people, for heaven's sake. Let's talk about Latinos. Let's talk any immigrant group, whether they came here for their own reasons or were brought here, have endured at the hands of whoever it is that are our founding fathers. So going forward, Eddie, I think we have to just undo and redo. Go to Eddie's conferences. That they'll give you some good ideas as to how to do that. Come to Critical Conversations. Thank you for the plug, Laura. You can do that by going to theacademysps.com and leaving your information. We're on Zoom, so you can, it's not like you have to even walk or drive. But I think we just need to say this: we haven't done a good job. Let's start now.
Okay, Dr. Duncan and Miss Laura, you have 1 minute now.
Oh, shoot, sorry.
Just to address
Sorry,
Dr. Moore's question, there is a school to prison pipeline in Iowa, in the nation. If you look at special ed percentages in 4th grade in Iowa, they mirror incarceration percentages in Iowa. That's that school to prison pipeline. There is a sense of urgency to do this. So I would just challenge you to educate yourself, be self-reflective. What's shaped your thinking who's in your circle and who's not and why. Be bold, try something new. Like Laura said, be curious, educate yourself, go out, and you need to get really uncomfortable before you get comfortable having dialogue around race. And it's not a get to, it's a have to. And we have to make sure that all stakeholders are engaging around these equity issues.
I didn't realize it was Dr. Eddie Moore. So I'm like, oh, you already know, Dr. Eddie Moore. You
Yeah.
already know. So you know the answer to that question. That's something that we have to work to change. And if people really want to be about figuring out, start with yourself. So it's the opportunities, like I said, with Dr. White's Academy. If you want to know what's in that 1619 project, you want to know about white privilege, Dr. Eddie Moore's White Privilege Conference. You know, there's educational experiences all around and for particular audiences. If you really want to know, don't be afraid of it. Get out there and know. Learn it, so you won't be making guesses or be stifling your children. Try not to keep them from something, which is the truth.
Well, we thank you, ladies, for taking your time for volunteering your time to make sure that people have the opportunity to learn about a very specific issue around controversy in education and what things we might do from it, educate ourselves, challenge what we know to be true, and infuse that throughout our curriculum. Again, thank you for joining us today, and happy conferencing. Our contact information should be in your guides if you want to reach out to any of us and ask additional questions.